I'm Chris Donay. I'm the founder of BeElevated, here with my co-founder, Dr. Nick Verhoeven. And we're joined today by Robert Leese, who is getting his PhD currently in molecular medicine. Robert, thank you for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure.
We would love to hear a little bit, about you, about your background, and what got you interested in nootropics and functional mushrooms.
Sure. So I received a bachelor's in biochemistry from McDaniel College. And there, most of my interest was in organic synthesis and synthesizing new drugs, new compounds. And now I am finishing up my PhD in molecular medicine, like you mentioned. I currently study early brain development in disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, trying to figure out what's going wrong in the very early stages of brain development that can set you up for these disorders later on down the line, right? So ultimately, nootropics is almost an intersection of my interests, right? I'm interested in brain science, how the brain works, how the brain functions, and I'm interested in organic compounds, right? Well, do we synthesize compounds? How can, yeah, right? So that's kind of where nootropics comes in. And the other thing is I'm a PhD student. I am looking to optimize my performance. I am looking to take whatever I can to help me help myself, and mushrooms are one of those things. They've been used for thousands of years. People have known about them for thousands of years. And I think as more and more research comes out, we're seeing that mushrooms have a wide ranging positive benefits, right?
For sure.
So
yeah, awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate hearing a little bit about you and kind of your journey there. We agree that functional mushrooms have a very important place in our health, and it's great that more research is being started there. Dr. Nick here and I, as we've begun our journey, have really enjoyed kind of diving into a lot of that. But you tried BeElevated in our product, and the various nootropics are in there. And you mentioned that you had a very positive experience to us with that. What kind of changes or effects did you notice after trying it?
Right. So, I mean, the biggest one is focus, right? So when I take BeElevated, more so than just normal coffee or anything, I find myself being able to dial in on what I'm looking at. I find distractions, all the outside noise, I'm able to kind of filter them out better. And it just allows me to lock in on what I'm trying to do. And even more so than the acute experience of, okay, I drink my coffee, now I'm working. I find throughout the day, and especially as I take it over the course of a couple of weeks, I'm feeling better as a whole, right? I'm feeling that not only am I more focused when I drink it in the morning, and then it kind of falls off the way that coffee does. I find that I'm just feeling better, I guess, elevated, right, throughout the day. And to me, that's one of the best or biggest effects that I've noticed is I just feel better overall as I take it.
We love that plug with Elevated. Well, that's great to hear. There's precisely what, when Dr. Nick was doing his research here, what we were going for, right? The cognitive benefits, increasing focus, and without that drag, without the jitters, or without the losing that energy boost, towards the end of the day. So, compared to other coffees, I know you've seen other ones, competitors out there. What kind of, how has BeElevated compared to some of those, or other nootropic products that you might have come across?
Right. So I mean, the biggest thing with BeElevated is I think it works compared to other products that, maybe there was some placebo effect with it, but I can't say that I've tried other mushroom coffees that I've truly felt better on, right? Maybe I felt better when I was drinking it because I know I'm drinking mushroom coffee and whatever. But with BeElevated, and I'm especially over drinking it for several weeks in a row, I feel better overall, right? I feel like there's a real effect from the coffee beyond just what my mind is trying to tell me I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that difference between a brief placebo effect versus a real effect that I get every time I drink it, that's the biggest difference for BeElevated for me.
Speaking to that, were there any unexpected benefits that you got from it? Because I mean, you have some experience with nootropics in general. So, was there anything that kind of stood out to you that, yeah, was unexpected?
I think the overall feeling of well-being has stood out to me the most, right?
Mhm.
Especially when, again, I drink coffee to wake myself up in the morning to push through into work, right? But not feeling that crash afterwards, not having that lull in the afternoon that I was used to with other coffees. I think the biggest or most unexpected effect for me was that I felt better all day throughout the day. I feel like I'm sleeping better, probably because I'm getting more work done, feeling better about my day, and then I'm able to rest better at night, right? And there is some science that supports, some of these substances in helping with sleep, but I think probably the biggest one comes down to I feel better about my day. I feel like I am getting what I want to get done, and I feel like I can rest at night. And it's a really good feeling. It makes me feel better mentally. I feel better physically. I feel better. Just everything is, again, elevated, right? It's a good name. I told you, I like the name.
Yeah,
But
we'll definitely appreciate that. And like, I definitely get that your mind isn't racing at night because you're like, oh man, I have like 10 different things to do, right? Because you had a productive day and feel accomplished.
right,
Um,
exactly. And it's, again, that without no fall off, no lull in the middle of the day, that's probably the most unexpected thing for me, is
yeah.
that it genuinely does make me feel good all day. And that's great for me.
Is there any, I'm curious, is there any particular ingredient in BeElevated that you think is accomplishing that, or do you think it's just kind of the whole group there?
So a bit of both, right? There are specific ingredients, and I would love to talk about like each of the ingredients. And I've looked into these a good bit, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think the combination of ingredients that you have is really what's driving most of these feelings. And I love that there are only, the four nootropics and coffee, right? You're not throwing everything at the wall and
Yeah.
seeing what works. You're not overloading, on nootropics. You have very potent, proven ingredients that work well together.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think Nick here can attest to some of that. Like a lot of, while we were doing the research, we were really focused on cutting out the crap, not putting in anything that's artificial or unnecessary, nothing that didn't have any science behind it. Uh, we were highly focused on what works, what is needed, and nothing else.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think you hit that mark, and you look at a lot of like pre-workouts on the market out there, right? You'll have a list of 20 or 30 different ingredients, nootropic, energy boost, this, that, and the other. And ultimately, we don't understand enough about what these ingredients are doing on their own. When you put two together, that's a whole nother research to figure out how they interact.
yeah,
If you're putting 20 of them together, you can't just say this was proven in one system and therefore we're going to throw it in. This was proven in another system, let's throw it in. And I think that you've done a very good job of looking at ingredients that are relatively safe across the board, have been looked at in several different systems, and combine them in such a way that they are effective without overloading a person's senses, about a person's body. So I think that's great.
So you said you wanted to talk a little bit more about the science of some of these ingredients. Like what, I guess, just as a side note, I'm curious, like which ingredient you're most interested in, because we've got taurine, we've got rhodiola rosea, we've got cordyceps, obviously coffee, and then we've got L-theanine. Is there one that like you find especially intriguing, just because you said that you've looked into the science?
Right. So I think that cordyceps itself is probably the most powerful, most potent ingredient in there, right? And I believe that it's the highest concentration that you have in the mix, right?
Correct. It's 3 grams.
Right. And that's a lot for, especially for a drink, right? So cordyceps have across the board several different things that they're doing in terms of cognitive enhancement, in terms of cellular energy, and in terms of immune function and stress response, right? And I think that the combination of cordyceps with L-theanine and with taurine, you're looking at both the cellular energy production and this calming effect on the brain. So you're simultaneously getting this increased focus, this increase in clarity, while you're decreasing the anxiety that comes with overstimulation of your brain, right? And then cordyceps is also an adaptogen, like rhodiola rosea is, right? So adaptogens help kind of balance out and stabilize your mood. They help you adapt to your situation and adapt to stress, hence the name adaptogen, right? So rhodiola rosea really helps to modulate some neurotransmitters like dopamine, like serotonin and norepinephrine. And that alone is helping to enhance your mood and focus under stress. Cordyceps have been shown to decrease cortisol levels, which is, once again, helping with your stress response. Then taurine, and I know Nick is more of an expert on taurine than I am, right? But I know that taurine has a lot to do or helps to suppress some pro-inflammatory cytokines, and taurine also helps with like antioxidant and cardiac function, right? So I think that all of these ingredients together, but especially the mushrooms, right, especially cordyceps, they're really helping to increase clarity, increase focus, decrease anxiety, this calm, collective, focused clarity is just unmatched from other products that I've tried. And the combination of them that you have, the potency, the amount that you're including, right? They are the clinical levels that have been tested and been shown and proven to work. So that I think is just fantastic about this product.
Yeah, that was definitely a prime area that we wanted to focus on, make sure that the dosing was appropriate to what the studies, the human studies, actually showed.
Mhm.
It's interesting you pointed out cordyceps, just because there's I don't know if in your reading you ran across a molecule in cordyceps called cordycepin, something along those. And did you? I mean, I'll ask you, but I can jump in on a little bit of the mechanism of action for that, because there's some interesting, I really have to say, very preliminary data related to cancer and cordycepin, but it also has some other effects. Have you read into that at all?
So cordycepin, I know, is an anti-inflammatory, and I know is an antioxidant, right? And we know that antioxidants are crucial in prevention of cancer, because when you have all of these free radicals and, you know, oxygen molecules running around, they're going to attack DNA, and that's bad. So cordycepin specifically for cancer that I haven't looked into or seen, but I can imagine through an antioxidant mechanism, it can definitely help curb the risk for cancer, right? What I do know about cordycepin is in a study from 2022, it showed acute cognitive enhancement through reductions in neuroinflammation and other oxidative stress pathways, right? Cordyceps also help in the long term with neuroprotective properties through, again, those same mechanisms, right? You're reducing the amount of free radicals, and that's what antioxidants are best for. and you're reducing the amount of inflammation that's happening. Inflammation is a natural response of your body, but oftentimes the body is just trying to fix the problem, right? It doesn't realize that it is creating more problems by doing so. So something like an anti-inflammatory can really help reduce and help that. Before I let you get into cancer more, the other thing I want to say about cordyceps, yes, cordycepin is one of the main bioactive molecules in there, but we've also seen some promising preliminary data on cordyceps and gut health and gut microbiome, right? So some of the metabolites from cordyceps are short chain fatty acids, and these have been shown to act to promote healthy gut flora and also eliminate some pathogenic bacteria in your gut, right? So by helping to balance out your gut microbiome, we know there's a connection between your brain and your gut microbiome. We know if your gut is working better, your brain is going to work better, all of your systems are going to work better. So I think that cordycepin itself is probably acting more in the brain, and then other metabolites from cordyceps are helping your gut microbiome, and together it just acts as a very powerful 1-2 punch.
What do you think it is? So you're saying that cordyceps have an effect on the microbiome, and that then the microbiome, my understanding is the microbiome then generates these short chain fats that get absorbed into the body. Do you think it's like the some other molecules within cordyceps that ultimately end up getting generated into these short chain fats, or do they have kind of an ancillary effect on the generation of these short chain fats? Like, have you run across anything on that, or any speculation too?
Right. So I'm not too sure, but I think it would probably be the first mechanism that you were explaining, right? Where you have just an increase in healthy gut microbiota, and that is helping to break down the other foods that you're eating, right?
Yeah,
And I mean, the other consideration, right, is if you are actively looking into nootropics, you're probably trying to eat better as well. So you're probably getting healthier food to work with anyway, right? So all of these things, there are probably a couple hundred explanations for them, but ultimately we can't deny that there is a correlation between you eat cordyceps and you have an increase in healthy gut microbiome. And that's crucial.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had not run across that literature. I mean, we've been focused a lot on cognition and physical performance and whatnot, but I just happened to run across some of the cancer research, which again, just want to repeat, there's no human data on this. This is just all preliminary, but the mechanism of action, which Bobby, you might really appreciate, is the chemical structure of cordycepin is very close to adenine nucleotides. So the same stuff that our body or our cells use. And in the production of the RNA, so when, for anybody listening, for when genes get expressed or read, you have this protein that attaches to them and then ultimately reads them and then spits out an RNA chain, which ultimately then gets turned into a protein, or gets read and then turned into a protein. And because of the structure of cordycepin, it can actually get integrated into that RNA chain, which ultimately leads to the chain no longer gets elongated, so that it breaks that whole process of turning into proteins. Now, the reason why that's important in cancer is because with this stopping of this RNA being produced, then you're no longer getting the functional proteins that the cancer needs to then continue to grow. And what's fascinating about that is that it seems to be more targeted towards cancers as opposed to healthy cells, simply because of the rate of division. That cordycepin just seems to, you can almost think of it like a troublemaker. It just gets in the way of all these different functions. Like the RNA is one thing, but it also can get in the way of the binding pocket of enzymes. So enzymes are these proteins, again, for those listening, enzymes are these functional proteins that serve a number of different functions. So they'll bind to different molecules and turn them into other molecules. They'll do all kinds of different things. And cordycepin can interfere by binding into a specific pocket where the enzyme would usually use energy, use ATP, so adenosine triphosphate, to then liberate that energy and create a product out of a molecule that it's bound to. But with cordycepin, because it binds to it, the enzyme can no longer fulfill its normal function. So with cancer cells, again, because you have this mass want to proliferate, to grow, and to build more cancer cells, cordycepin just seems to perturb it in all these different areas. So I just thought that was really fascinating. Although, again, it's not the main reason why we have it in there.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like these functional mushrooms. They just seem to have so many different use cases and so many ways that they can help the body and help, not just in cognition but potentially cancer, energy, you name it, athleticism, anything like that. Seems like there's a lot of different ways that they can be used.
For sure. And again, not to, I don't want Nick's point to be like misconstrued, right? With it stops proteins, right? That's kind of the way that or chemotherapy works in cancer, right? We target the proliferating, dividing cells, right? So saying that this targets cells that are making all these proteins, it's targeting cells that specifically for cancer, right? The cancerous cells more than standard cells, right?
Normal healthy cells, normal cell division. Yeah.
right.
I also like your point about cortisol, the effect that cordyceps might have on cortisol, because my understanding is that Rhodiola rosea might have similar effects. So you have now two compounds that might affect cortisol, which cortisol levels are significantly elevated in the morning when we're taking our coffee generally. So I wonder if that has an effect, if both of those compounds might be having an effect on cortisol, decreasing cortisol, and therefore leading to a little bit of that mood stabilization that you're talking about.
I'm sure it does. The combination of these compounds is what's most impressive about the product to me, right? And I know that you guys have done a ton of research to reach that conclusion yourselves, right? So it's not crazy I'm saying that, but these ingredients are potent and they both stack and complement each other incredibly well. Like you mentioned, the cordyceps and rhodiola both reduce cortisol in the morning, right? L-theanine also promotes like alpha waves in the brain and helps that calming effect. So it's all different mechanisms that are stacking on top of each other to help calm you, to reduce that anxiety, reduce that outside noise, while you're also getting increased ATP production. You're also getting this increase in energy, and then you have caffeine, right? And we all know what caffeine does.
Most popular drug in the world, right?
Sure, and there's a good reason for it. So it's the combination of these drugs that both stack on each other and complement each other in fantastic ways that make this such a potent, good, productive product.
Yeah, actually, there's I don't know if you ever read, I mean, I'm sure you're busy with what you have going on, but I don't know if you read this like really influential science paper, and I don't mean that for anybody listening. I'm not talking like science, like just general science. I'm talking about the massive journal called Science, like Nature, Cell, etc. But this science paper that came out 2 years ago on taurine, where taurine, they gave it to animals and their level of anxiety decreased a lot as well. So again, I wonder, that's in animals, and a lot of the research that we've been referencing other than the cancer research has been in humans. So reductions in anxiety and an even keel feeling and just general feeling of well-being. L-theanine, Rhodiola rosea, cordyceps, that's all human research, but there's also some animal research with taurine indicating substantial decreases in anxiety. So, now, and this was that was just kind of like a side note, because again, the way that we wanted to approach things was to focus almost exclusively, at least put a 90% weight on human studies. But it just so happens that there's a happy coincidence that in this massive paper, where they were looking at like health span, they were looking at muscle function, stem cell function, all kinds of other outcomes, and blood glucose levels, blood pressure, all that stuff. And they showed that with taurine that you would see the substantial decrease in anxiety. So it kind of goes to your point that there may be just another happy coincidence that taurine may also feed into this whole idea of this equalization, or however you want to describe it, of like your mood and feeling better.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the mechanism? Taurine is a one molecule in here I'm not as familiar with, right? I think I mentioned that. Do you know the mechanism through which it was helping? Did they go into that, or?
The only mechanism, so this is one of those studies where it was this massive study, and they gave taurine to a bunch of different types of animals. Obviously, mice is one of them. They gave it to zebrafish. They also gave it to monkeys. And they showed basically it was universal across all three. There might have been one other animal that I can't remember, but ultimately across all three, they showed these positive effects across, I don't know, I would say like maybe 50 different measurements. It was a ton of work. But what I always find kind of unsatisfying about that kind of research, like you're asking me, like, well, what was the mechanism? It's just like they just apply this stuff, and then you just see these effects. Like, for example, you might see improvements in stem cells, or you might see reductions in senescent cells, which is another thing that they looked at. But my question, just like yours, is like, well, how does that exactly happen? Like, once taurine gets to the cell, what actually happens? And unfortunately, this study didn't go into it. And maybe, I'm sure there is research that's looked into it. I just haven't looked into it myself. But you briefly mentioned cardiac effects of taurine. That I have looked into to a little bit of a degree. And taurine enters the cell and has an effect on some of the exchange of ions of the cell. So, the sodium, potassium pumps and all that. And it seems to have an effect on calcium flux as well throughout the cell. So this exchange of ions ultimately leads to changes within the cell in a kind of a broad view.
I see. So taurine effects on the brain then, right? If it's affecting, some of these ion channels and such.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that taurine is having an effect on, like dopaminergic neurons and such, and excitatory neurons. And, that's probably also contributing to this increase in focus, this increase in cognitive ability that we see as well. So all of these effects just, again, stack on top of each other and then complement each other as well to really bring out the best, most positive effects and minimize the downside and negative effects without, again, slamming you with 20 different substances that are, properly running amok after all of the interactions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Bobby, I would love to steer the conversation into, we just went over all the different ingredients, how they are interacting with the body, diving into some mechanisms. That can be overwhelming for a lot of people, especially who don't have a science background. They might see research paper, but can't really, digest it particularly well. For the average person, looking to get into nootropics, what kind of how do you think they should go about getting them into their daily routine? And, what kind of things should they be looking for, looking out for?
Mm-hmm. So I think that if you're going to start with products, start with something like this, like BeElevated, right? Something that has a few very potent, well-researched, safe nootropics, right? You don't want to start by taking 10 different things. You want to start slow, right? Maybe half a scoop it for the first week until you see how your body reacts to it, and then bump up to a full scoop if you are feeling confident and feeling good about it. So I think that it's best to trust people like Nick, right? Trust the people that have really looked into it and studied the cellular mechanisms, the consequences on tissue level, the consequences on systemic levels, right? Trust the people that have looked into it and put these products together more than you trust any one individual product that makes some massive claim like Rhodiola Rosea is your cure to everything, right?
Mhm.
And then, so my biggest advice would be to just start with some proven ingredients, start with these proven products like BeElevated, for example, and start small and work your way up. And then on the reverse side, if you are feeling good, that doesn't mean, at 5 scoops the next week or something, right?
Yes.
Because ultimately, I mean, look at, something like vitamins, right? Some of these products, you have grams of vitamins that they put in, and your body absorbs a couple of micrograms of it, right? And the rest just gets excreted. So there is a balance to be found between what's good, what's just not good or worthless and not helpful, and then what's actually harmful, right? So start small and work your way up to clinical but safe doses and levels, which again, in your product, I think that you have found a good balance of safe effectiveness. Um, and that's my biggest recommendation. Just don't overdo it, especially in the beginning, because a lot of times less is more.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. A lot of people want to, very gung ho. They want to dive right in, and you can end up hurting yourself that way.
I get it. And a lot of the claims, you hear the claims that are made, right? And if you just believe them without a critical eye, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking I'm going to take this and I'm going to feel great, and then you almost get burnt out with it really quickly when your expectations aren't met. You don't just get to take this compound and feel amazing and all your work just gets done and your life is fantastic now. So I do think that having reasonable expectations about what these products are going to do, and recognizing, it can take time for these products to build up, right? Like the neuroprotective effects, you may not ever realize that you have a neuroprotective effect, and that means it's working, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't develop dementia down the line, you're not going to say like, oh, like it worked because something didn't happen, you know?
That
And
negative is always hard to see.
for sure, right? And you don't feel anxiety like you would if you just down 300 megs of caffeine when you take this product, right? You don't feel it. You're not going to say, oh, well, this product doesn't work because I didn't feel anxious, right? It's something that is working in the background, and that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, love that.
Mhm.
Over your time, is there any other nootropic type products that you looked at, or that you maybe take yourself, or anything along those lines?
Sure. So the other functional mushroom that I've taken is lion's mane, right? And I know that there has been a good amount of research on some neurogenic effects of lion's mane and also neuroprotective effects similar to cordyceps. So lion's mane is one that I've looked into and that I've taken myself in the past. And then the other nootropic that I've taken is tyrosine, right? And that's just a precursor to dopamine. I like dopamine. More dopamine is a good thing for me, right? But outside of that, I haven't felt the need to supplement with those compounds since I have taken to BeElevated, right? I don't feel as if I felt better taking those, or that I need to add those to this stack to feel good about myself and my day and my productivity. So that's the biggest thing. You know, there are other things. Maybe if you add them, maybe you'll feel good. But I honestly like where BeElevated currently is with its neurotropic approach.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Again, like stay small. Like there's no reason to add more when you don't need to, right? It's always find the thing that works and keep on doing that thing, right? If you find yourself taking 25 different pills every day to feel good, you're probably doing too much. I would say.
Yeah, at that point, I would argue you probably want to look elsewhere for help than, in extra supplements,
Awesome.
Hmm.
Well, Bobby, it was a pleasure speaking with you today, and having you dive deep on us with us on all these ingredients and the product itself. Thanks for sharing your experience and your insights. Where can people follow your work or learn more about your research that you're doing?
That's a good question. So I am a bit late to the social media game myself. I do have a LinkedIn page that I plan to update pretty soon. I'm going to need to, because I need to look for a job once I graduate in a couple months. So LinkedIn is probably the best place that you can find me.
Awesome.
Robert Lease. I go to University of Maryland, Baltimore.
Well, we'll be sure to link that in the video description.
Sure. Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.